And the problem with society right now as it stands, and the problem why you're feeling lazy, unmotivated, as unproductive, is you have your dopamine wires crossed. Dopamine Detox. How to go from lazy to being productive. If I sat there and I said to you, are you a lazy person or a productive person? I would get a multitude of different answers. Oh, I'm lazy during these times, or I'm more productive when I do this, or I am a productive person, or I'm a lazy person. But every answer that I'd get is very different. And I want to challenge the status quo, because I believe wholeheartedly that when we are born, when we are ejected into the world, that nobody is born lazy. In fact, I think that as a pure animal being, we are actually born hungry to be productive. Specifically, we're born to be animals that survive and reproduce. To survive and reproduce requires a lot of effort, from finding food, to cooking the food, to attracting a mate, finding a mate, reproducing with the mate. All of this takes a lot of effort. And if you look at life, anything that is around food, or that helps you survive, or that helps you reproduce, are generally things that create happy thoughts and happy feelings. The reason that is that when that happens, dopamine is released. Dopamine, I call it the action chemical. It's the chemical that gets released to let your mind know that you are on the right track. You are on the right track to survive. You are on the right track to reproduce. Dopamine is the action chemical. And the problem with society right now as it stands, and the problem why you're feeling lazy, unmotivated, as unproductive, is you have your dopamine wires crossed. You're receiving dopamine from areas that incentivize more action, but actually lead you further away from reproduction and survival. And that's why you're not achieving or are at the place you want to be in your life. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. I talk about mastering your mind, transforming your body, and achieving freedom. Those are the 3 pillars of having a successful life full of abundance. And on this channel, every video specifically is designed to tackle one of those. Today, we're talking about obviously mastering your mind, specifically mastering dopamine. How to detox from dopamine and turn yourself from a lazy person to a productive person in 3 steps. Now I'm going to outline all the steps to you one by one of how to do a dopamine detox in those 3 steps. So much so that not only do you detox from dopamine and stop relating to yourself as a lazy person and begin to be a productive person, but also make sure you stay to the end, because there's things you want to avoid to make sure that this is lasting and not something that you get just for a day or 2 days and then fall back into your lazy patterns. So make sure you stay to the end. So, just before we actually get into the 3 steps, I want to quickly run down how I'm going to use dopamine in this context and what dopamine is and what it should mean to you. I've already said that dopamine is a chemical that drives action. It's quite simple. Activities that we do, if our brain or our neurochemistry receives that as a thing that is making us progress further in life, whether it be financially, emotionally, relationshiply, physically, mentally, or progress basically where you get to be better than, or stand out, or rise above your community, to lead in your community. Anything that is related to things that can bring you more wealth, more abundance, more friends, more community, all of those things, your brain will release dopamine. It's a happy, it's a feel-good chemical, and when it releases it, we are like monkeys and we just chase after that dopamine hit. It's the only thing that our mind knows to go for. That is how we've survived this long. That is how we've managed to reproduce. That is how we have come to the technological era that we are in today. That is what dopamine is. So what's the problem with dopamine? If it's all good and well and it shows us where to go and how to achieve things, then everything should be okay. So why are we still lazy? Well, the reason is with the technological age that's occurred, we are now experiencing dopamine hits from unnatural sources. And we experience them so much that we start gearing towards those things and only those things. See, where you may perceive yourself as lazy, I don't perceive you or any human being as lazy. Bet your bottom dollar you are still chasing that dopamine hit. It's just the difference is the dopamine hit that you're chasing and that a dopamine hit that a productive person is chasing are two different things. So, all you've got to understand about dopamine is a chemical that drives action. You are not lazy. You are just confined by dopamine producing things that you are chasing that require minimal effort to get. I'll say that again. You are not lazy. You are just getting your hits of dopamine from the places that they're really easy to get, but don't actually move the needle forward in your life. So, enough is enough. Step 1 of how to do a dopamine detox. It is to detoxify your brain of dopamine hits, of where you're receiving them, where it's not productive to you at all and is causing you to be a lazy person. So step 1 is very, very simple. Identify your dopamine release triggers. You want to identify everywhere in your life that you produce dopamine from activities that you perform. Let me give you an example. When we eat food, you will feel pleasure, you will feel happiness. That is dopamine being produced. If I'm eating fish and vegetables, that is producing dopamine. I've identified that's producing dopamine. When I'm eating ice cream, candy bars, popcorn, when I say that, did you find that your happiness meter in your mind, in your feeling, went up a little bit compared to fish and veggies, for example? So the reason is both produce dopamine. However, your dopamine that's produced through ice cream, sugar, and lollies is much higher. That is why you feel happier with those foods. So the first step is identifying where dopamine is being produced at high levels for yourself. That can be while having sex. That can be while going to nightclubs, while listening to music, while playing PlayStation, while eating candy bars, while eating ice cream. I'm a big fan of ice cream, so I don't eat ice cream anymore, at least for now. But it could be anything. The reason is a lot of people out there will talk about dopamine detoxes and they'll say do this and do this, but the reality is that you as a human being are getting your dopamine from a very specific set of places. And wherever you're getting them, you'll most likely be in an ongoing loop of coming back for more and hitting that same receptor and getting more and more dopamine. This is making you lazy. So all you've got to do, and maybe right now you can identify some of the things that give you a lot of pleasure, a lot of dopamine, and put it in the comments. Put it in the comments, what's your number 1, 2, or 3 things that provide you with the most amount of pleasure and the most amount of dopamine? That's the first step. Go do that now. Put it in the comment. Write it in. Write, I get my dopamine from. So step 1, you've identified where your dopamine comes from. That's good. The importance of that step is to understand that wherever your dopamine comes from, those activities you're naturally, instinctually going to be craving, going to be moving towards. So first, you do have to identify, which I hope you've done so now. If you haven't, maybe even after this video, write a few of them down. Or rewatch the video again when you get a chance. Write them down. Step 2 in being able to do a dopamine detox to get you from lazy to productive. Step 2, not 4. Step 2 is now categorize your dopamine response activities into useful and not useful. Let me explain. If I'm eating fish and veggies and I'm receiving dopamine from fish and veggies, and at the moment I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to bulk up at the gym, or I'm trying to lead a healthy lifestyle, is that a useful place for dopamine to come from? The answer is yes, because the dopamine that I receive from eating fish and veggies is in line with me achieving my goals. Now, on the other hand, if I take and I look that I get a lot of dopamine from when I eat a hot jam donut, and I look at that and I'm trying to be leaner at the moment, I'm trying to be healthier, that I would categorize as not useful. That is not a useful place for me to be getting my dopamine from. Now I can go on like this forever, because if you look at the hot jam donut and you eat it, the more you're going to get your dopamine hit from something like sugar or fatty foods or things that produce a high amount of dopamine, the less the fish and the veggie dopamine is going to be as appealing to your brain. Your brain isn't silly. If it knows the hot jam donut produces a higher hit of dopamine, it is going to try and hit that button way more than hitting the button of the fish and veggies. I'll give you another example. How do you categorize if it's a useful place to get dopamine from or not a useful place to get dopamine from? Let's take television. I sit there and I watch, for example, garbage television. I'm watching The Bachelor or X on the Beach or Big Brother. That's what I'm watching. And I get enjoyment from that and I get pleasure from that. Now let's say I'm building a business, or I'm trying to learn something new, or I'm trying to expand my horizons and walk into a new career or get into a new relationship because I've been stuck at home for so long. Is that activity going to be useful for me to take me to my goals? I would say no. But let's take, on the other hand, I'm watching television. But on the television, I've actually downloaded a course teaching me about the new thing that I've wanted to learn. For example, I've wanted to learn about photography, and I'm watching a course about photography, and I get dopamine hits from here. Is that useful? Is that progressing me towards my goals? Then yes. So again, I'll recap, because the second step is vitally important and nobody teaches it. And if you don't do it, you're actually going to miss out. Most people preach dopamine detoxes. Just get rid of everything dopamine. Get rid of it all. Rah, get rid of it. Be superhuman. Don't do anything. Just drink water. Don't sleep. Work. No. In the first step, you've identified all the things that produce dopamine for you, whether they be small or large. 2 is categorize them all into useful and not useful for your current state. For example, if my current state is I've been too stressed out and I just need to relax, then garbage television, hot jam donuts, relaxing music, meditation, yoga would all be useful dopamine producers to achieve my goal of relaxing. If you're feeling lazy right now and you want to become productive, as this video is about, then things like sitting on the couch for 2 hours a day watching television, things like sleeping in, that you probably get a dopamine hit from because you love sleeping in, are probably not useful. Scrolling for hours through social media, chasing likes, notifications, getting those false dopamine hits which still lead you to chase those dopamine hits and not be productive in other places where you want to be productive, then those areas are not useful. So take your current state, take whatever your mission is, whatever your goal is right now. If you're building a business, then separate all your dopamine hits into what's useful and what's not useful. If you're trying to build a relationship of your dreams, a person that you love, cherish, and will spend the rest of your life with you, then separate useful and not useful. At that point, Tinder, Bumble, dating apps might be really useful on the dopamine production level. It might be very useful, but dating apps while you're trying to build a business is in the non-useful category. I hope you're getting what I'm saying is you have to take what your main one thing is that you're up to right now and categorize everywhere where you get pleasure and dopamine hits from into, is it helping me achieve that or is it not? That is step 2. Step 3. Step 3 of how to do a dopamine detox to get yourself from lazy to productive. Mark out for yourself a period of time. I recommend 1 week. Find a period of time in the next couple of weeks that you have got 1 week where in that week you will only perform the useful dopamine activities and abstain completely from the non-useful dopamine activities. For that 1 week, all the activities on your useful column of your dopamine you will do, and all the things that aren't useful you won't do. You will literally abstain from it. All you have to do in the third step is identify a week where you can do that, where you're not going to have new stresses or things that come up that you know are your weak points. Find a week, plan ahead, and for that week, you are not doing any of your non-useful dopamine activities. If some of them involve other people, let's say you're very social, or you go out, or you do stuff that revolves around other people, let them know for that week, I am not doing those activities. And on step 3, your job is to just go out and do that week. Now, what you're going to find is going to happen. Most likely in the column of useful dopamine producers, most of them won't be producing a heap amount of dopamine as compared to your useless ones. If you're feeling lazy, right? You'll much rather eat hot jam donuts than fish. When you abstain from all of these, in the first couple of days, you're going to remove the happiest bits or the pleasurous bits out of you. The first couple of days is not going to be happy. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be sunshine and roses. It's not going to be fairy floss. It's not going to be candy. It's not going to be easy. But here's what happens after those 3 days. Because in your first 3 days, you've removed all this, but you're still getting dopamine hits from your useful side. And as the 3 days comes, as you get longer and longer, your brain has actually detoxed from the high dopamine hits, and it suddenly now sees these as the highest dopamine hits that it's receiving, and you stop going from lazy to super productive and begin chasing more and more your useful dopamine producing activities. This is huge for you to understand. It's even huger for you to actually action it. Step 3 is find 1 week where you can abstain from all your non-useful dopamine producing activities. Begin by abstaining and still doing the useful ones. Over the first couple of days, it'll first suck, but then it'll get better, easier. And what will happen in 1 week, you will find yourself most likely 10 to 20x your productivity that you were before. Not only that, but all of the productivity points are going to be in your useful dopamine producing activities. So what you'll find is many people that do this for a week is they actually make more progress in their business, in their weight loss goals, in their health, in their relationships. They make more progress in that 1 week sometimes than they've made in months beforehand. That's the real power of a dopamine detox in these 3 steps. Now, I said if you stay to the end of the video, I'd tell you how to make sure you don't go back. And this is the bonus. The important thing is most people after a week, they'll experience this surge of productivity, and then they'll go to reward themselves with some of those high dopamine useless activities. The problem is you've got to understand that you are not in control of your brain. Your brain is in control of you. After a week, you won't have a high or a big urge to chase these activities with a high dopamine production. So the bonus tip is from here on in, if you want to make these changes lasting, then set yourself goals. And only when you hit a certain goal, allow yourself one activity that produces high dopamine that's not really useful for this side, for your useful side. What that'll actually do is by setting that goal, your mind still knows that there's something that can produce higher dopamine, so it will chase that goal so much faster, so much harder, with more intensity, more productivity, because it knows it's got this reward at the end. Then you enjoy your reward, but you only enjoy it once. Maybe it's 1 donut. Maybe it's 6 donuts. Maybe it's playing video games. I'm gonna play video games for 1 entire day. Whatever it is for you, make sure it's marked out as one event, one thing. Then have that event and then go right back into only your useful dopamine producing activities and set yourself a new goal for in the future for when you can again indulge in a high dopamine producing activity. Those 3 steps, along with the bonus of how to actually set goals and subconsciously tie them to reward systems and pleasure systems that are specific to you, that you know you love and your brain produces high amounts of dopamine for, that whole piece right there can make the difference of your entire life. It can make the difference of you achieving your goals or not. It can make the difference of you achieving your goals in 1 year or 50 years. It can make the difference of you living your life in regret for the rest of your life, or actually becoming the person that you've always envisioned that you can and should become. This is the dopamine detox. 3 steps. Number 1, identify your specific dopamine producing activities. Number 2, categorize them into useful for my goals right now, not useful for my goals right now. 3, identify 1 week where you abstain from all non-useful dopamine activities. And the bonus is from there on in, set goals tied to your dopamine high producing activities that you can have once in a while. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. For me, this segment made the biggest difference in my life. In fact, I would probably say that 95% of my productivity and my drive, my intensity, my ability to action stuff faster, harder than most people around me is due to this one hack. Use it wisely. Make sure you put down in the comments what are your highest producing dopamine activities. And also, if you've got any questions, I answer all questions at the moment. So please write them in there. I will respond. Go out, live your best life. And if you've come this far, you should by now be subscribed. Like this video. Hit the bell notification, because if I go live, which I do every so often, I'll answer all your questions live. But if you're not notified when that comes out, you won't see it, you won't get it, you won't be able to be there. You have a choice right now. You can rise up and become a better version of yourself and attack your demons and actually look at your life and be like, no, I'm gonna get far in my life. I'm not gonna live my life in regret. Or you can go and watch another cat video and see where that takes you. Anyway, it's been real. Check you on the next one.